Weather Channel, a special presentation. Hurricane Hugo destroyed homes and lives. But was Hugo just a harbinger of deadly storms to come? Have we developed our coastal areas wisely? Are we prepared for what can happen when hurricane winds reach force 4?
This is Sullivan's Island, South Carolina. The city of Charleston is a few miles west of here, that way. Folly Island, down the coast to the south. There's been a lot of development here along the South Carolina coastline. But even so, it's kind of quiet this time of the morning. As I stand here in the calm morning breezes, it's hard for me to imagine what it must have been like for folks along the coast last September when they were staring down the barrel of a killer. The worst hurricane to hit the East Coast in decades. Hurricane Hugo. Dubbed the storm of the century in the Carolinas, Hugo came ashore like a runaway freight train, striking at midnight on September 21st, 1989. And when it was over, 27 were dead in South Carolina, 82 dead in all. Hugo was the most destructive hurricane ever. The first reconnaissance flight by the National Weather Service found a powerful Category 5 hurricane. The storm had downgraded to a Category 4 by the time it cut a swath across the Caribbean, exacting a grim toll, 41 lives, with over $2 billion worth of property destroyed. In Puerto Rico alone, Hugo claimed 12 lives and left over $1 billion in damage. When it turned toward the United States, it was a Category 2 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, still a dangerous storm, but nothing compared to the Force 4 cataclysm it would soon become. From Florida to the Carolinas, hours, even days before landfall, preparations were being made to safeguard life and property. But residents and emergency officials alike were in for a nasty surprise.
We weren't expecting Hugo to increase his intensity as quickly as he did, and with the short notice, so to speak, that Hugo gave us. We were planning. The storm was a Category 2 initially when it started coming into our area. We planned for a Category 2, and even to give a little safe margin, some of our decisions were made based on a low Category 3. With him coming in and hitting the upper part of our county as a Category 4, that was a surprise in itself. It's not that we weren't prepared for it, we just didn't realize it.
When did we realize that the storm had changed strength?
Well, certainly by Thursday afternoon, we had very good evidence of that. We were getting reconnaissance reports, and each one of them showed the pressure was a little bit lower and the winds a little bit higher than it had been on the one before. Now, we have often noticed in forecasting hurricanes that when you get that kind of deepening of the hurricane, it almost always continues for some hours before it changes. And other than that, everything was all set up. The eye was shrinking, we had beautiful outflow, and it was crossing the Gulf Stream.
Did everyone evacuate?
Everyone, well, except for about 15 people. And we went around. Some of the older people that had been here for a while didn't want to go, but I personally went back and knocked on those doors and I said, look, this isn't a David, this isn't a Bob, this is serious. And they left. The 15 people stayed or so. I've only talked to 3 of those, and they say they won't do it again.
As prepared as you were you prepared for the full magnitude of Hurricane Hugo?
That's hard to answer because if the hurricane had moved just a little south of us, there would have been a lot of difference. They'd probably just wiped Folly off the map.
Many homes, apartments completely destroyed, nothing left. Some of them not even a foundation left to them. Just a bare sand spot where they once stood.
But to the north of Folly Island, the small town of McClellanville, South Carolina, wasn't as fortunate. This is what McClellanville looked like when I visited in July of 1990, 10 months after Hugo struck. Imagine what it was like here when the storm was at its peak. Jennings Austin doesn't have to imagine. He lived the nightmare. His Lincoln High School housed some 1,100 people as an emergency shelter. The designation of the school as a shelter was the result of a surveyor's error. It was 8 feet lower than safety officials believed.
We lost power around 9 o'clock. That's the phones. We had no communications with anybody anywhere. The only lights we had in the building were just you've seen the emergency hall lights. A couple of the students and I, as a matter of fact, we were in this room right here, and one of the assistant football coaches were down here putting some books up on the shelves back here. I guess this was around midnight, and we heard a scream out of one of the rooms down here, and we ran down there, and we found one of these units here. The classrooms have two heating air conditioning units, and the surge had hit the campus, and the water had knocked these units out.
Knocked them physically out of the
Knocked them
wall?
out. They were at about 5 feet out, and the water was coming in all the rooms, and within about, I would say, 5 minutes, water was up to my chest in the whole building. At one point, I thought we were all going to drown. I guess I realized that when I walked back outside, managed to get back out in the hall, and I saw the water level of the building in the hall. It was very scary, and yeah, truthfully, I thought we were all going to drown.
But Jennings Austin didn't drown. On the second desperate attempt, he and others managed to break a window and pull themselves onto the roof. Battered and dazed by rain and wind, they waited there for sunrise, while those still trapped inside the school punched out ceiling tiles and held their children above the rising waters. Jennings Austin and all the people in his school survived Hugo with a newfound appreciation for what Mother Nature can do. Today, the city of Charleston is well on the road to recovery, and some important lessons have been learned here. But have those lessons been heeded in other cities vulnerable to nature's most brutal storm? Cities like Miami Beach. In recent years, this city has taken on a new life, a new look. Renovations along the waterfront have brought a distinct European flair to the once aging Grand Dame of American vacation spots. But it's been more than 25 years since a hurricane struck the Miami Gold Coast. Most residents here have never experienced a serious storm, and despite the new look, Miami Beach is still threatened by its age-old adversary. Any concerns about hurricanes?
No, I wouldn't say I dwell on it. I suppose keep an eye on them in hurricane season, watch the news, and if there's a threat of one, keep track of it. But lived in a lot of places where subject to different kinds of natural disasters.
Are you afraid of a hurricane?
Not really. Perhaps it's foolish, but I'm not.
Could another storm like Hugo, perhaps even worse than Hugo, strike the east coast of the United States in our lifetime? We'll take a look at the theory of hurricane cycles in a moment.
Now, your local forecast, accurate and dependable from the Weather Channel.
more we learn about the way our planet works, the more we find that nature runs in cycles. Drought and flood. Years of crop failure and times of plenty. A warming of the planet followed by a cooling off or glacial period. What once appeared to be random changes in our environment, when viewed over long periods of time, turn out to be the intricately structured ebb and flow of natural events. Researchers have long observed that hurricanes follow cycles. Now a new finding by Dr. William Gray of Colorado State University may explain this observation.
Thank you very much.
I met Dr. Gray at the 1990 National Hurricane Conference in Houston, Texas, where he was the keynote speaker and where his theory was the center of attention. The essence of the theory is this. Rainfall in the Sahel region of northern Africa follows a cycle, averaging 20 years of drought, then 20 years of rain. Increased rainfall in the Sahel correlates with higher incidence in the Caribbean and Atlantic of intense hurricanes, those with winds of 111 miles per hour, of Category 3 or higher on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Or, to put it simply, when they have more rain here, we have more strong hurricanes here. The physical evidence is astounding. Look at the hurricane tracks of storms that occurred during the 10 driest years of the past 40, most of which occurred in the 1970s and 1980s. Now compare that to storm tracks during the 10 wettest years, all of them in the 1950s and 1960s. The increase in tropical storms, those developing below 30 degrees north latitude, is unequivocal. This appears to be just the latest in a series of discoveries concerning natural cycles on a planetary scale. Last year, we reported here on the findings of Dr. Harry Van Loon of the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado. Dr. Van Loon's research helped correlate changes in the weather on the surface of the Earth to the solar sunspot cycle, something scientists have tried to do for centuries. Coincidentally, the sunspot cycle runs 22 years from start to finish. The next obvious question, could the sunspot cycle then be tied to the 20-year drought cycle in the Sahel, and thus tied as well to the hurricane cycle proposed by Dr. Gray? It seems a logical next avenue for researchers to explore, and only further study will tell. But for now, research indicates that the drought that has plagued the Sahel region since the early 1970s may have finally broken. Rainfall is up in the region, and that means storms of Category 3 and higher, storms such as Gilbert in 1988 and Hugo in 1989, may be on the rise as well. Dr. Gray points out that his research turns up an apparent correlation, not necessarily a cause and effect relationship. And to a scientist, that distinction is important.
It's not the West Africa rainfall itself that makes the difference. What it is, I view it is, it's the general circulation features around the globe, those general circulation features that make it rain in West Africa more are those features conducive to intense storms.
The Weather Channel's own John Hope offers a cautionary note.
One thing I think we need to be a little bit careful about when we talk about hurricane cycles. Now, we've got some good correlations. We know that when it's wet in the Sahel of Africa that they're more apt to get hurricanes in Florida and along the East Coast. Now, this is primarily true if we think about a long period of time, say a decade or so. And we have to be a little bit careful about implying what that might mean for 1 year. Because even if we look back in the 40s and 60s when it was wet in Africa, we generally had more hurricanes than normal, and we did have a lot over Florida and the East Coast. There were years interspersed in there, individual single years, where there were not very many hurricanes at all.
And so we have a new, more precise tool for predicting hurricane activity over the next decade. And what that tool shows us of the next decade is frightening. 40, even 20 years ago, these homes weren't here. But man loves the sea. And so in the relative calm of the last 20 years, he's built his homes, restaurants, and hotels closer and closer to the shoreline. But if Dr. Gray is correct, Charleston, indeed the entire East Coast, may face many more hurricanes as strong as Hugo or stronger in the years to come. And that does not bode well for the East Coast of the United States, particularly the Sunshine State.
Well, I would say the next 10 to 20 years, particularly Florida. Florida is a sitting duck for intense storms.
When we come back, we'll look at what some experts believe is a catastrophe waiting to happen.
Call the Weather Channel Connection, 1-900-WEATHER, before you hit the road, and you'll be prepared for any weather Old Man Winter brings.
The average person spends 1/3 of their life sleeping, and that's why you should consider buying a Wonder Bed. Wonder Beds electrically adjust to any position for reading or watching TV, and it's been proven to help people with medical problems such as bad backs, hiatal hernias, poor circulation, and irregular breathing. With Wonder Bed, there's no pressure or obligation. If you're sick of companies that won't give you the price until you've had a high-pressure demonstration in your home, call Wonder Bed now at 1-800-543-0020 for your free video, brochure, and price list. You'll see our quality and prices are unbeatable. Wonder Beds come in all sizes and can be connected to your head and footboards. The motor and mattress have a 15-year, 100% non-prorated guarantee with nationwide service. Wonder Bed also guarantees satisfaction. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee if for whatever reason you're not totally happy. So call 1-800-543-0020 to receive the free video, brochure, and price list through the mail at no cost or obligation.
If you're about to travel, watch the 5-Day Business Planner here on the Weather Channel at 20 minutes after every hour. You get a comprehensive national report that covers the forecast over the next 5 days. Watch the 5-Day Business Planner coming up soon on the Weather Channel. Now, your local forecast, accurate and dependable from the Weather Channel.
If Dr. Gray's theory of hurricane cycles is correct, if there are more and bigger Hugos to come, it is more vital than ever that we be prepared, that we build wisely, and that we understand the magnitude of the forces we're dealing with. It is more vital than ever that we learn the lessons that nature is trying to teach us. Much of our future safety depends on getting the most complete and accurate information available on an approaching storm. The National Weather Service is undertaking the most extensive modernization in its 100-year history. But the computer has not been invented that will tell forecasters when a hurricane is about to gain strength or change direction.
When Hugo intensified so rapidly there at the end, it seemed like everybody kind of missed that quick intensification. Why?
Don't know.
Have any idea?
Don't know. And I think I don't have any problem using that as an answer. We just simply don't know exactly what happened at the end. It did intensify. It both strengthened in intensity and also in forward motion at the last. And that's one of the reasons, of course, that the major error in the forecast for Hugo was what happened after it came ashore. We simply don't know what caused that rapid intensification at the last. We're studying it, and I'm hoping that some of the research work that comes out of looking at all the detailed data from that gives us a hint.
And therein lies one lesson. Too often we assume that our technology will take care of us. Usually it does. Sometimes it simply can't.
We want people to know, of course, that this hurricane, actually the eye came in just a little bit northeast of Charleston, and the worst damage up there was in an area that's not very heavily populated up around McClellanville. Had the eye of the hurricane come in down the coast farther, then the damage in Charleston would have been tremendous, and I'm afraid there would have been a lot more fatalities. We need to be aware that most of the devices that we see and that we use in hurricane forecasting help us a whole lot to observe the storm more than it does really to forecast it.
Of all the lessons learned from Hugo, some are more obvious than others, or at least it seems they would be. We've been videotaping some of the reconstruction here on Follies Island, and we find that people are building back on the same sites that they were before. Are they building the same way?
They may be building back on the same site, but definitely not the same way. They're now having to meet federal guidelines. If their property was destroyed and they did not meet the FEMA guidelines, if they're building back today, they're certainly meeting the FEMA guidelines plus the hurricane construction codes and also your southern building codes here on Folly. So they are better built homes today.
What if Hugo had hit South Florida, let's say here in Miami?
In terms of building structures, we have better codes here than they did in the South Carolina area. So in terms of total damage, we'd have less damage per building, but we have so many more buildings that we'd have much more damage overall. Now, a hurricane moving in from the east-southeast, moving towards the west-northwest, similar to Hugo, is estimated to cause more than $10 billion worth of damage across our area here in South Florida.
How do you feel about the security of all the new building, the hotels and residences, if we enter into an active season?
They've never really been tested. As we look at high-rise buildings, we've never had a Category 4 or Category 5 hurricane strike an area like Miami that's on right on the coastal area with high-rise glass buildings. The problem here in the southeast Florida is that we have so many more people, and our roadway systems are not designed to handle the numbers of people that have to be evacuated from the zones where the hurricane is going to make landfall. So it takes a lot longer to evacuate people. The Florida Keys, 30 hours, one road that comes up, and that road will be cut off well before the center of the storm is going to get there. In my opinion, if we're going to have large loss of life from the hurricane, it's going to be from the water, and it's going to be people in their cars. It's going to be people in the Florida Keys trying to get out when it's too late. When the roads are cut off, car in front of you, car in back of you, and you're not going anywhere. And then we had that in the 35 hurricane when it came along, and even the train was swept off of the track. Even the tracks were swept away, and we lost nearly 500 people down there.
Has anything been done, if Hugo were to occur again this year, you'd think that you might be better prepared?
Oh, absolutely. As we've talked previously, we've learned in every area, we've learned something. Here again, our evacuation was not our downfall. It did not create the problem. And when we came back, we had some problems, but they weren't of the magnitude that were devastating, but there was a lot of stumbles, a lot of false starts and so forth, and we can improve on those vastly. But Folly is a sort of a community. The people pitched in, and I mean, the help was just coming from every corner. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better spirit than what we had here.
And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all, the importance of spirit, of individual effort, of state of mind. We are each responsible for our own safety. We are as safe as we choose to be. And how safe we keep ourselves has more to do with our state of mind than with our abilities as home builders or our technological know-how as weather forecasters. Simply put, we must think safety. Having taken up the cause of disaster preparedness as her personal campaign, Marilyn Quayle has given a lot of thought to safety.
I think one important thing that we should be doing immediately is educating the population. What to do, what not to do, what you should have on hand, what to expect, and once again to heed the warnings. You can always rebuild a house. You can always replace a car or your furniture, but you can't replace your life. So thinking you're going to be able to ride out the storm is foolishness. Heed the warnings and evacuate, and understand the importance of following instructions.
The folks here in Charleston, South Carolina, and the surrounding area have learned a difficult lesson. They've seen just how powerful the forces of nature can be. But have they stopped building closer to the water? Well, no. As we pointed out earlier, man loves the sea, loves to be close to the sea, and always will. But they're building their homes and their businesses safer. Along the East Coast, from Miami to Long Island, there are millions of structures that, as Dr. Gray points out, are sitting ducks for the next Hurricane Hugo. And make no mistake, there'll be another Hugo. If Dr. Gray is accurate, there may be many more in the next 20 years. Now, we've not always been prudent about our development of the coastline. We've made many mistakes. But until we learn to take the forces of nature seriously, we'll have to live with those mistakes. And unfortunately, sometimes die with them. Marshall Seese, the Weather Channel.
We hope you enjoyed our special Force 4. Coming up in a few minutes, we're going to be taking a look at a very active storm pattern out on the west coast. Still having some problems with some flooding. Southern areas of California with roads closed and quite a bit of rain. In fact, we're still seeing a flash flood warning in effect for the Los Angeles County area there. The radar showing you the rain continuing, and we've had reports of near Antelope Valley as much as several inches of rain, creating some problems with flooding there. Vince Miller will be along here in a moment to update you on the complete situation out in the west, and we'll give you the forecast for the nation as a whole coming up here in a few minutes. Stay tuned.